Housing Delivery Committee. We're starting. My intention in starting a few seconds early was to avoid the fire practice, but I had no joy. Obviously, we've just had the fire practice, which is held weekly. That was actually purely the practice. If we hear it later, it will be the real thing. So people should actually depart, go down the ramp to the right, and reassemble by the piazza, by the cathedral. Those, even those who don't have 20/20 vision will notice I'm not Councillor Barry Parsons. Obviously, you will have to deal with the less handsome Vice Chairman today. I'm Councillor Richard Eddy. Barry has a non-major surgical procedure today, and he gives his apologies. I'm sure you will join me in actually wishing him the best of luck and a full and swift recovery. Barry tells us he intends to be back in harness by Monday, so he won't be missing for long. We've got a fairly busy agenda. Those of you of a certain age may call it resembles an old-fashioned telephone book, of course. So I would ask members, officers, and also the general public to exercise some self-discipline so we can achieve it and get through matters in a reasonable time frame. Could I also welcome Councillor Ed Fraser, who's actually substituting for Councillor Parsons. Welcome to the committee. I hope you enjoy it. In my view, it's probably the best of the policy committees, but I'm probably biased, of course. Right, we move on to apologies for absence. Rose?
So, as Councillor Eddy mentioned, we've received apologies from Councillor Barry Parsons and also from Councillor Paul Goggin.
And are there any declarations of interest, please? No. Minutes of the previous meetings. You will have noticed these weren't circulated with the papers. Officers had quite a number of corrections late, so we felt it would be wise to take it for transparency to the next committee for the members to look at and approve. So clearly there are no matters arising, of course. Chair's announcements. I've mentioned the busy, heavy agenda before us today as in an attempt to actually make that more manageable. Members have been both given briefings on the finance paper and also last week on the general needs transfer of accommodation to a temporary accommodation, and also members were asked to actually submit written questions by Monday. Several members availed themselves of that, so thank you for that. Hopefully you've had a full response. So I hope any questions will be far more focused than sometimes they have been. Secondly, as far as officers are concerned, I've asked them to actually limit presentations to 5 minutes. So I'm hoping you will actually achieve that and abide by that. Certainly when I was chairman of DCA, that was a very strict target, and officers who didn't actually succeed, well, they incurred the wrath of the chairman. and possibly worse, of course. Hopefully that won't happen today. As far as the public is concerned, again, thank you for your detailed questions and statements. When we come to that, I propose to reverse the orders because several of you who are asking questions have submitted statements, and I think it's sensible to put the context first. If I could urge you to summarise your statement if possible, that should allow more time to get through the questions. According to standing orders, we only have 30 minutes, so if you summarise your statements, there will be more time for questions and answers. There were a number of items I was asked to mention. The consultation on the coming council budget goes on to the 19th of December. Could I urge members to engage with that if they wish? And by members, I mean also the public, of course. The winter edition of Housing News should be circulated electronically and in paper form in the next 2 weeks, so I urge you to read that too. Finally, could I mention that last Tuesday, members of the committee were able to engage in a scrutiny workshop to look at our work programme. So we'll have some feedback about that in the new year, of course. We'll now move on to public forum. As I said, I propose to take statements first and then move on to questions. First of all, I've got Shaban Ali. Shaban, are you there? No. Then I have Amina Yusuf. Yusuf, sorry. Yeah. Dan Ackford I recognise, so he's definitely there.
You've read my statement, it's quite lengthy. Then I can see that there's improvements happening in the housing department and they're going to take time. In the meantime, trust really needs to be rebuilt. The Barton House evacuation was a debacle that cost the city close to £10 million and traumatised the residents of that building. There is an ongoing harm to the residents who are still suffering from that trauma by not being rehoused. That this committee isn't fulfilling the two electoral pledges made to the residents of Barton House by the largest party in this council is both a breach of trust and bad governance. You need to find out why the evacuation was carried out so badly and start rehousing people. I hope the root cause analysis mentioned in agenda item 12 is actually done properly and worth the time and paper used to produce it. In particular, I hope that frontline staff and members of the Unite Union are invited to join the sessions, because one of the things that need to be analysed is why details of the huge problems in the housing department weren't reaching councillors. Thank you.
Thanks, Dan. You've got questions later, so you'll have a chance to ask supplementaries then. I've heard that we've had apologies from Hilary Ryden and Jan Wren, so our members will just receive their statement. Thank you. Can I move on to the questions? Question 1 and 2, we've had apologies for. Question 3 is not here. Question 4 is not here. Question 5, 6 and 7 is from Minor, who's not here. Joanna Booth? Oh, sorry. Oh, right. So you have you received your written response? Yes?
Yeah, go on. She would like to recap. Is that okay?
Could I just clarify, have you seen the written council reply? You haven't. In that case, can I suggest a Rose to my left, she reads out the reply to each question, and then you have a right to a supplementary. Rose.
Dear Housing Committee, my name is Ali Absia and I am 12 years old.
Sorry.
One day I hope to become a lawyer or a barrister so that I can defend those
Sorry
who
to
defend
interrupt.
themselves. Until recently, I have
sorry
always
to
lived-
interrupt. Could I? We're in questions, so what I'm going. Yeah, it's not statements. So I'll actually ask the officer to read the reply, and then you can actually ask a question to the response. Well, we passed statements, but we're doing pretty well time-wise, so I'm prepared to go back. Could you, all right, that's fine. Would you like to make the statement? I've just said, please go on.
Until recently, I had always lived in Barton House. It was my home for as long as I can remember. I loved living there. I knew all my neighbours. We were like one big family. I played with their kids, and when we ran out of salt and sugar, we would knock on each other's doors to borrow some. They did the same. That's how close we were. But everything changed on the 14th of November 2023. That was the day my mum picked me up from school, and we came home to find the media and news crews outside. Everyone was talking about how the building might collapse. We were evacuated, and since then, life has been unbearable. My mum is strong and always speaks up for us, and that makes me proud. But I am struggling to stay strong myself. I try not to show my emotions, but the truth is, Barton House no longer feels like home. Every night I sleep fully clothed with my jacket on, just in case the alarm goes off again, like it did last weekend. I don't feel safe. The situation is affecting me in ways I never thought possible, even though I try to hide it. The trauma of living in a building that might collapse has taken over our lives. Our routine is gone, and we are all exhausted. I wake up 3 times every night because I can't sleep. Each time I go to my mum's room to cuddle with her because I feel scared. Her bed is too small for both of us, so she helps me fall asleep, and then goes back to her room. But when I wake up again, I go back to hers. This happens over and over until the morning. By 5:40 a.m. we start our day, but we are already so tired we can barely function. We've given you all the evidence of how this situation has impacted us, but we feel like nothing is changing. Barton House is no longer a home for us. It's a place of fear and exhaustion. I'm tired of seeing my mum trying her best and getting nowhere. She deserves better. I deserve better. Right now, my trust in the council is gone. The way we've been treated has made us feel invisible and unheard. I don't want to live in Barton House anymore. Please, I beg you to rehouse us as soon as possible. We can't go on like this.
Thank you for that. And I apologise for the confusion about missing you in the first session. We've got 3 questions from you. I don't think you've seen the replies, so Rose, would you mind going through them?
Of course. So in response to question 5, applications for the housing register are assessed based on an individual's needs and updated as household circumstances change for any reason. All applications can be updated, and new or previously unknown information from the household or key professionals can be submitted, and this is fully assessed. This includes information on the impacts of trauma on any household member that is linked to their housing or home's location.
Do you have a question for that?
We have been assessed, and our doctor said we have to be rehoused due to the anxiety and the mental health that is happening to us. My question is, what is enough? Because we have offered everything we can to the council and we're not going to stop. So what is enough? Because we've got the doctor's notes, we've got the school notes, we've got everyone's notes, we've got the letters from the community. So what is enough? That's the only thing I need to know, because we had enough being treated like we're idiots. And you look down on us. Every time we email to John Smith, he says, thank you, you felt that way. No respect. He has zero respect for us. Fiona Lester ignored us. So what is enough? That's the only thing we need to know. What is enough?
I can appreciate your passion and your concern, of course. I'm pleased to say only this Monday at Councillor Parsons' my PCCB briefing, we had the first report about Barton House and actually the accommodation needs. Now, we believed actually that was, well, the officer confirmed inadequate because we still had not received the Equalities Impact Assessment. That's due to come to us very shortly. That meeting was attended by one of your 2 ward councillors. We've actually asked that both ward councillors should be available and attend on your behalf in the new year when we actually have the report. Can you go to the next question, please?
So here's the response to question 6 in the public forum.
Sorry, how it works. How it works is you've asked questions very fairly, we've replied, then you have a chance to ask a follow-up question. Could I please ask you, I appreciate how passionate you feel, but actually, do you want to hear the question? Right. Could I please, look, we will only make progress, as you rightly said. As you rightly said, there has been not the best form of communication so far, so it will be better actually if we had real engagement. Right, do you want to go ahead?
So the response to question 6 in the public forum: when applications for rehousing are being assessed, all relevant information provided by professionals and the
Please.
applicant are considered and assessed fairly and consistently, regardless of the applicant's background. The council has a specialist health and housing team, which consists of trained medical professionals with expertise in assessing people's health-related housing needs. The health and housing team considers cases where a significant amount of health-related information has been provided to ensure consistency in decision-making. Information...
I appreciate the whole concept is you must ask questions to the reply. I appreciate you're not going to have satisfaction with the written replies you've got. But can I assure you, only on Monday, as I said, we had a report and we are due to follow that up in the new year. I'm not going to engage in a shouting match, I'm sorry. We'll move on to question 8, Joanna Beef. Joanna, are you here? No. Joanna? No. Joanna's not. So that's question 8 and 9 and 10. Dan, it's back to question 11. Obviously, the answers were approved by Councillor Parsons, who's not here, but I've asked if I'm unable to answer, whether officers could answer, please. So your question 11, please.
Questions 12 and 13.
Right, 12 and 13, go ahead.
Well, question 12 was about the Housing Management Board. The answer given is non-responsive to the question. I asked who took the decision, which decision-making body shut down the Housing Management Board. The answer does not give that information. Please can I have an answer to the original question?
Thank you, Dan. Sorry, apologies. I've reread the answer, and you're absolutely right. It isn't as accurate as we'd like it to be. So you asked who made the decision, where the decision was made. It was made on the 31st of July, and who made that decision? Councillor Parsons asked us to review the role and structure of the Housing Management Board in light of the change in the new committee system, and that's recorded in the minutes of that meeting.
Could I just add, Dan, I'm probably the only member here who was a member when the conception of the HMB back in 2009, Councillor John Keeley set up to give tenants a more meaningful voice in the city. And certainly I don't see it's been shut down, but it's certainly been paused while a decision's going to be made. Dan, question 13.
Again, the answer given is not responsive to the question. I didn't ask whether money was approved or who took the decision. I asked under what power, authority or delegation of authority the decision was taken. I've gone through the HRA budget and there is no mention of a housing and consumer standard programme, and more specifically I cannot see any delegation to officers of a power in their HRA that would cover setting up such a transformation programme. Under exactly what power was the decision made?
Thank you, Dan. I believe John Smith will reply.
Yes, good morning, Dan. Yes, I'm happy to respond on that. So, in terms of the budget, and as it says here, an allocation was made towards work to address issues that have been identified as challenges within the housing stock. It's fair to say that wasn't specifically contemplating the Housing and Consumer Standards Programme, but I think officers, when setting the budget, realised there would need to be some improvement work in this area. As you know, the self-referral happened in April, which was after the budget was set, and the regulatory judgment happened in July. So certainly, whilst there was an allowance made of 0.5 million, as you'll have seen from the other record here, significantly more money has been spent on that programme than that. In terms of decision, it was an officer decision that was made, Dan, at that point. We had received a report from Savills, which was published, I think, when we set up the Housing Consumer Standards Programme at the first Homes and Housing Delivery Committee. That Savills report recommended that we did self-refer. We consulted the administration at the time, but it was a decision made by senior officers to self-refer at that point, and as a result of that, we set up the programme.
The last questions come from Mike Ordgreve. Mike, are you here?
He's not here. I'm just going to say the answer given is still not responsive. I still don't understand what power the decision was taken under.
Unfortunately, we've got to actually have his supplementary. May I thank members of the public for their contributions and move on to our first item. In fact, it's a series of three. They're all linked, of course, to do with tackling homelessness and rough sleepiness in this city. Paul Sylvester, the head of Housing Options, is the officer. So Paul's going to do an introductory 5 minutes presentation covering all four linked reports. Then we'll move on one by one to talk about them and come back and actually set the context of each. Paul.
Thank you, Chair. So I'm going to start with doing a bit of scene setting, like Councillor already said, before moving on to each report in turn. But first of all, I'm going to read a short extract from the foreword of our new homelessness strategy. The impact of homelessness can be destructive for both families and individuals. Mental and physical health can be impacted negatively, along with employment and education for both adults and children. The destructive nature of such experiences result in long-term consequences for those impacted. For these reasons, reducing homelessness and rough sleeping is a priority for the Council and a key commitment in our corporate strategy. So I think that short extract helps to set the context for the reports that follow. So there's a lot of activity going on in this space, demonstrated by the fact that we've got 4 reports in front of committee today, and the Council is investing significant resources in improving our homelessness services and reducing our expenditure on temporary accommodation. And we all know about the financial pressures the Council is under, and that temporary accommodation spend forms part of that. And I've talked before about the sweet spot where you can have both improved outcomes for people and spend less on temporary accommodation by improving our success in preventing homelessness and providing good quality temporary accommodation that meets the needs of our clients. So the reports today are all connected, so I'm going to talk briefly about the threads that connect those reports. But the 4 reports are our 5-year homelessness and rough sleeping strategy and action plan, our quarterly update on the Tackling Homelessness programme, our framework contract for using hotels as emergency accommodation, and options for using general needs council housing for temporary accommodation. So the first report, the 5-year homelessness and rough sleeping strategy, it's our roadmap to reducing homelessness and rough sleeping, improving positive outcomes and reducing expenditure on TA, temporary accommodation. It's an extensive piece of collaboration that reminds the city that the council cannot do this on its own, and thankfully we've got an active, valued and diverse homelessness sector in Bristol. The 4 strategic priorities of prevention, accommodation, working in partnership and helping people move forwards provide a framework for all our activities and are reflected in the 3 remaining reports. Our second report, an update on Tackling Homelessness programme, our council-wide transformation programme, majoring on prevention and accommodation, where many of the activities are included in the strategy action plan and contribute to all 4 strategic priorities.
Did I just stop you?
Sorry, Chair. Are we dealing with 3 reports in one? Or are we going to deal with
just
one report at a time?
Paul's doing an overarching presentation.
And then it'll be a short introduction to each report, if that's okay.
Because that's really important, because I think we need to deal with each of these issues
Absolutely.
completely separately.
Well,
I just wanted to clarify the position.
recommendations are clearly defined for
Yeah.
each, and you're right.
Of course,
thank you.
of course.
Apologies
of course.
for my interruption.
No,
Thank you.
absolutely, no worries. And the and the third report, our framework contract for using hotels as emergency accommodation, is a stark reminder of the acute housing crisis that we have in Bristol, and that we're still using hotels for emergency accommodation, and that we are on an improvement journey. But again, we have a clear action in the strategy action plan to end our use of hotels as emergency accommodation. And the 4th report, and I'm going to finish this very soon, using general needs council housing as temporary accommodation. So this initiative, as well as providing good quality temporary accommodation and meeting the needs of clients and costing less than private temporary accommodation, will also help us to end our use of hotels by increasing the supply of alternative temporary accommodation. So, Chair, I hope that overview was useful. And shall we move on to the first report?
Yes.
Okay. So, so the first report, which is on the screen, is our 5-year homelessness and rough sleeping strategy. So the report seeks committee approval on the council's homelessness and rough sleeping strategy, which is in compliance with the council's legal requirement to produce an updated homelessness strategy at least every 5 years, and the accompanying action plan for 2025, which will be revised and updated annually to support the delivery of the 4 strategic priorities. So first of all, apologies for the 134 pages of information. You can see that there's been an incredible amount of work that's been put into developing this strategy and action plan. And I want to thank colleagues in policy strategy and public affairs for getting us to this point, and particularly Alfie Thomas, who is sat behind me, and a colleague of his, Helen Parnham. So within the pack, you've got 4 documents. We've got the strategy document, the action plan, the homelessness review, which is the data set that we use to inform our work, and the consultation report. So there's a lot of information here, and I'm not going to go through 134 pages, but I'm going to pull out some key points. We established a steering group with representatives from the wider homelessness sector to oversee this work, which was co-chaired between me and a person with lived experience of homelessness. And it is really important to all of us that people with lived experience had a voice in these strategic discussions. So we started off with the homelessness review, the data piece, looking at trends, what's changed since the last time we did a review, and how does that inform what we need to do. Following the review, we carried out an extensive engagement piece to develop the 4 strategic priorities and objectives. This is something we're proud of. As part of that engagement, the council conducted 13 different workshops and listening exercises, which resulted in speaking to over 170 different colleagues, professionals, volunteers and people with lived experience of homelessness. And feedback from those people with lived experience helped to shape the priorities and objectives. We went out to consult, and when the consultation resulted in lower than completed completions, we didn't accept that. Instead, we extended the consultation period, and we went up from 126 surveys to 395. So the response from the consultation on the priorities was overwhelmingly positive. The consultation feedback was analysed in real time and helped shape the final version of the strategy and action plan, along with feedback from the steering group and engagement sessions. It's important to note that whilst the strategy is a 5-year strategy, the action plan will be reviewed annually. We've had some recent feedback from a member of the committee on gender-based homelessness and women's rough sleeping census, and we are happy to include those amendments in the action plan. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Paul. Firstly, can I thank officers for the hard work they've done on this. This both reflects their own hard work and their determination to address this chronic ill, but also reflects actually the political cross-party determination to address this issue. In my view, homelessness is the worst blight in this city. The housing crisis is undoubtedly the first issue, but homelessness is the worst one in my view. And if Councillor Goggin was here, which he isn't, he's spoken passionately from personal experience about the need to address this, and that's important, of course. And not only is it key because obviously homeless people, there are a huge range of linked problems to do with getting a job, getting employment, housing, obviously, access to healthcare. It needs to be addressed as part of that, of course. But also, as we will see in later reports from Paul, the financial cost is huge. We're losing in housing subsidy at £14 million per year, and that's something that leakage can't go on, of course. So I'll open it to debate here. Zoe. I wasn't aware. Sorry. Well, let's go to Zoe and then we call you Joss.
So just as Councillor Eddie has said, thank you so much for the amount of work that's gone into this. It was quite a few hours last night reading it in thorough detail, and I genuinely want to say I do appreciate the work that's gone into it. There are some parts that are very thorough and some parts I would have loved to have seen more on. So parts that are very thorough, for example, is that there's a lot of detail about how people with protected characteristics are more disproportionately likely to be at risk of homelessness. I'm not going to lie, I didn't need a 110 or 20 page report to tell me that, but I do appreciate the effort that was put into that. There's another bit where it's like, there's a survey where you're asking people, highly important to not very important at all. How important is it that we have more housing? And shockingly, 75% said, housing is really important to me. Again, not rocket science. Bits that really excited me, though, that I would have loved to have seen more on is, so on page 82, it says that, Paul, you will be tasked with ensuring each service has at least one priority in preventing homelessness and a related KPI. When I see KPI, I get excited because that's tangible targets that we can actually measure. But then there's nothing else that's related to these KPIs. How are they going to be set? How are they quantifiable? What criteria are they going to be? Is the KPIs going to be set here at committee? Please tell me more about these KPIs that are going to be across departments so that we can measure whether or not we're actually got a success here.
Paul, can I suggest you hold your horses for a moment? I'll get a few members to comment, then we'll do a collective reply. Josh, at least I'm not sitting next to you, so you won't punch me in the arm.
I'll save that to later, Chair.
Indeed.
Be assured. I know you'll enjoy it.
Indeed.
Okay, so I have sort of two issues, really. One is the action plan, which I think is something that Zoe may have alluded to. If there, you said you're going to bring back in a year's time so that we can see how we're doing against the action plan. If there are areas that we are not achieving, how are you going to review and adjust so that we make sure that we are hitting those targets? I think that's going to be quite important, and for this committee it's going to be pretty important for us to know about that. The other thing is a bit of a learning point, really. I do recall you putting out a call for extra people to fill in the survey, because obviously you only got 126 initially, and then there was a call out to councillors and people to fill in the survey, and we still only achieved 400. I just wonder what the learning points from that are. I mean, obviously across the council as a whole, we're doing surveys all the time, and I just wonder whether it's a very niche area, this, and we expect a very low response rate, but clearly something didn't quite go right initially. So I'd just be interested to hear your thoughts on that. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Are there any other? Sib?
Chair, I don't know if it's worth just maybe Paul answering those before we knock him on with a few more.
I'm wondering if 3 might be the maximum that I can hold.
Yeah. Well, that's a challenge for you. If you want to go ahead with at least one question or point.
Okay. So in 2021, Bristol was rated one of the worst cities to live in if you're from an ethnic minority background. And that was in education, employment, criminal justice, and housing. Looking at this impact assessment, it is very clear that that is still the case. And one of the things that kind of stuck at me, and I'd like your clarification on, is I agree with the concept of housing first. However, the concept of housing first is more about thinking about health and well-being needs first. However, the impact assessment looks at people in homelessness that have passed away, black, reason, finance, disabled, also linked to finance, and then you have poverty. So would it be more of a meritable approach to directly focus on economic access that leads to health and well-being outcomes, as opposed to focusing on improving poor health and well-being outcomes so that people access economic outcomes? Because that seems the other way around. And if this A City Divided report points on the fact that there's deep social and economic inopportunity for those from marginal background, if we put health and well-being, we are still putting economic access further down the chain. In the previous homeless strategy, priority number 3 had skills in it. And at this point, we don't have skills in it. Yes, I'll leave it there before we get into the next one.
So, Paul, you've got 3 meaty challenges.
Thank you. I think I reached my limit. So, regarding the KPIs, let's go in turn, that we're looking to for other key services to contribute towards homelessness prevention. So they haven't been set yet. So this is, the action is that we will agree on this part of our mobilising the strategy and getting all parts of the council to sign up to their part to play around preventing homelessness. I'll talk more about KPIs in a minute. So the action plan itself, so yeah, it will be refreshed annually, but it will be reviewed a lot more frequently than that. We're looking to have the steering group that helped us establish the strategy turning into a governance group that has oversight of the action plans. That's across city, cross homelessness sector, senior leaders in the sector meeting regularly to see how we're doing. And of course, you know, I'll welcome to hear feedback from the committee on how the committee would like to be kept updated and informed around progress of the action plan, and more than happy to provide regular updates at PCCB or whatever's needed. I think there is learning from the consultation, absolutely. I think there's some wider issues here around engagement with consultation pieces, and that is something that we are planning to pick up with the consultation team itself. I think, you know, things are bandied around like consultation fatigue sometimes. I think there may have been more than one housing consultation at the time. The other thing that we've heard back from people who receive our services is that, well, I went to an event, I told you what I thought, so I didn't fit in the survey. Okay, so we did really good early engagement work, and some people felt that they'd done enough there, they didn't have the time or the whatever to fill in a survey. But there is some learning there more widely on consultation and how we engage with people. I think the economic access, it's a really interesting point, and I felt that it was more prevalent and more in focus than you've read it as being. And I know that there isn't a clear objective around it, but we are very much looking at, and we are working with our learning and skills colleagues. I think a key part of being able to manage and live in Bristol is that you're in work and you're working to get better work, because it's a very expensive city to live in. Actually, the economic, it's one of the answers to many of the challenges that we have. So I think we are looking at. Apologies if it doesn't come out as loud and clear as we would hope, but it certainly is something that we are working on with Jane Taylor in her service, and that may be an area that we can explore with the committee going forwards.
Thank you, Chair. So just one thing I think we can add around skills. So one of the work streams that's within the Tackling Homelessness programme is working with an organisation called BEAM, and that's about directly linked to how we can think about homelessness in addition to economic well-being, and how we can access the two together. So there is one of the work streams within the Tackling Homelessness programme directly looks at this and is reflected, and we can share more on that as we move through.
That would be very welcome, and hopefully we can see that in part of the priorities and link that with any kind of data element into it. Yeah, outcomes. Thanks.
Thanks for that. That's my fault for compartmentalising. I was going to mention that in the next report, so it's just but yeah, that's
certainly in terms of feedback. You regularly bring your reports forward to PCCB, and then if we have it perhaps quarterly or 6 monthly, the stats of goals, we can obviously refer it for an update and engagement for this committee. Joss, did you feel your point was responded to there? Fine. Jerome?
Thank you, Chair. First, just kind of non-related question. Did we approve the minutes? Because it said minutes to follow in the agenda.
I explained that the minutes were very, very late. In fact, I haven't seen them. The officers have corrected them. So we felt, for transparency's sake, it would be better to approve at our next meeting.
Okay, just one thing that I want to say from that, which is that on the basis of the joinery workshop, I did say that we didn't have the latest accounts and was concerned about receiving those to make that decision. Craig is sending those to me.
Craig, yes.
Yeah,
I'm sure he'll deal with you
that's happening, but I just wanted to mention that today. Thank you very much for the report, and you know it is very comprehensive. I think that balance between summary, mid-level, and lots of detail isn't quite right. I particularly liked the kind of the summary of what the objectives for the last period were. You know, it was, you know, there were 4 things that you said with the objectives for for the last strategy, but we don't quite have that clarity. The big new one seems to be prevention, and I'd like to ask in terms of there's lots of concrete things that we can do in other areas, but what powers do you really, what difference do you think that we as a council can make on prevention? And then I've got a quick follow-up question
Just
as well.
that, I'll just ask Aded to ask his question.
Okay, thank you very much, Chair. And thank you also to officers for putting together a report. And I'm pleased to see that 2 of those key pillars in now are prevention, as Councillor Thomas just alluded to, and accommodation as well as the really key areas to focus on. I had 2 detailed questions. Firstly, this just in reference to some numbers on page 22 of the report. So under the social and affordable housing demand section, bullet point paragraph 3, it says there is a shortage of affordable housing in the city with a need to provide affordable housing for 13,973 households unable to afford to buy rent or buy over the period 2020 to 2024, equating to 699 households per year. Can I check the maths is right on that one? Because that appears to be, that second number appears to be a quarter of what you'd expect it to be based on that sentence. And then the other question I had was around, around what mitigations we have in this strategy for cases of mass eviction. So I'm sure many people have seen the news, the horrible case currently going on in Lewisham, where over 150 tenants at the Viva apartment block have been suddenly issued with Section 21 notices, seeing as they haven't been outlawed by the government yet. And that creates a huge pressure on local housing services and puts far more people at risk of homelessness, with lots of people suddenly having to enter the market at the same time, in a small geographical area. And we know that is the key cause for homelessness is people, when people come to the end of private tenancies, often from Section 21. So I'd be keen to know what mitigations we have in place to avoid those kind of horrible mass eviction situations that we're seeing in parts of South East London. Thank you.
Thank you. So, okay, let's talk about prevention first. So, we don't work in a bubble in Bristol. We work very closely with the other core cities and other local authorities, and we're always asking each other questions around how are you dealing with it, what are you doing differently. And it's clear that historically Bristol hasn't performed as well as it should do in terms of preventing homelessness. And partly because of that, we commissioned somebody to come in who was a homelessness expert to look at how we work, how we're set up, how we're structured, how we work with clients, and how we can change to better do more prevention work. That happened in sort of January, February this year, and it's feeding into our service redesign work, where we've got permission from the local authority to invest in the service on the basis that we'll spend less on temporary accommodation. There's a number of different things that we're doing. We are changing the approach to how we work with people who initially present to the councils as homeless. So we're getting our housing advisor experts at that first point of contact rather than an assistant advisor dealing with them. We're investing in the housing advisor role, so we're recruiting more housing advisors. Part of the challenge around prevention work is it can take time, and when you've got so many people presenting, 6,500 a year household coming to us, it becomes one after another. So we're creating the capacity and the space for the housing advisors to do more good prevention work. Alongside that, we are, in what is quite a difficult market, really ramping up our activities to help people stay in the private rented sector or go into another private rented property. So again, very happy to talk more about that whenever.
Sorry, Lisa.
Sorry. And then there was I haven't finished yet. Thank you. So there was I was struggling to see which page you were on, but I think I remember the point because it was about, I think it was the housing market assessment need figures, wasn't it, around what was needed? But I think you had a question that our maths were probably weren't right. Is that it?
Yeah, I'll repeat the numbers for you.
So we can check that.
Yeah, so it says 13,973 households during the period of 2020 to 2024, so that's 5 years. And then it says equating to 699 households per year. Now, 699 is 1/20th of that first number.
Okay, fine. So we'll check those figures.
Yeah,
My colleague will check that.
Yeah,
Thank you very much for pointing that out.
Well, it's important to note because that suggests that actually under the last administration that the amount of households per year is actually 4 times higher than the figure being presented, and so it's important that that's corrected if that's the case.
Certainly, we'll check that. And then the follow-up question was around mass evictions and more people coming out of the private rented sector and how we deal with that. So over the last decade or so, we've had relatively low numbers of mass eviction events. Most of them have happened when squats have been closed down and officers have been ready. So sort of not tenancies as such, but officers have been ready working alongside the police to support people who then would lose their home. We have got experience of hostels closing down and needing to move people out at quick notice, and the service will pivot and adapt to whatever is presented. We're not expecting in Bristol to see any of these events, but we are keeping our ear close to the ground around what's happening in the private renters sector, leading up to the Renters' Rights Bill, talking with landlords of what they're thinking about and maybe potentially leaving the market, trying to calm some nerves and encourage people to not make people homeless.
Right, Lisa, then Zoe, and then we must move on.
Yeah, well, thanks for that. Actually, to be honest with you, well, first of all, thank you very much for the answers to the questions that I submitted earlier this week. I was going to ask about Section 21, and I wanted to know, because it just says on your Action 23, it says that you're beginning to deliver the point of working with private landlords. Just wanted to know, I mean, it's a really quite simple maths here. I mean, generally speaking, I think the local housing allowance is about £1,080 for a 2-bedroom house. And if somebody's going to be evicted because the landlord wants to raise from £1,000 to £1,500, then obviously we can save for the local housing allowance £580 if we uplift the private rental agreement to stop that from happening. Is that the sort of thing that we are considering doing? Because it just says you're starting to deliver it. I just want to know a little bit more details of how that's going to happen with the private rental section.
Zoe?
So I have a 2-part question. I do apologise, and then I'm done on this item, I promise.
Is that a real promise or a political promise?
I can do a pinky promise if you'd like. So Action 37, the council and its partner housing providers will make more private rented and rented affordable housing available for homeless households to move into and consequently reduce the pressure on temporary accommodation. That sounds great. How are you going to do it? That's question part 1. So part 2 is that, as I've told you guys many times, I work in tenancy legal advice, and in recent months, since the announcement of the Renters' Rights Bill, 30% of my calls are tenants who have now been evicted because they're in preparation of Section 21s, and the other 30% are landlords who want to know how to evict their tenants after this ban comes in. And the big thing is it's going to be done through rent increases. Yes, rent increases absolutely must come through a Section 13 notice only once every 52 weeks with a month notice period. That's all true. But the rent increases will come and they will be in line with market value, which we live in a city where there is more people seeking accommodation than there is accommodation. So fundamentally, it is landlords who are setting the market value. There is nothing to stop them from saying, you know what, let's all raise our rent £400. Nothing to do that. Yes, they can go to a rent tribunal. I get to a point.
Ask you to make a question.
Okay, so my question is, we're solving one issue. Well, national government has solved one issue that is causing homelessness, but now we're going to have a huge issue with another cause of homelessness. There is nothing in this report that alludes to rent control. Why hasn't this been looked into, especially considering the Mayor's promises in 2021 to make Bristol a living rent city?
Okay, thank you. And I just want to check, this is just my first report, isn't it? Yeah, so I'm just nominee. Yeah, it's okay. Yeah. So,
so it probably seems like your
yeah,
last...
that's right. No, thank you for the question. I do mean it. So the private renting work, one short answer and then maybe a little bit more detail. We are coming to committee in February to talk about this area of work. Okay, so there'll be a lot more information for you to look at then. Okay.
Hang on. So he hasn't replied to
the main thing that I wanted to say about work in the private rented sector, that it isn't new. Yep, we've been having to work in the private rented sector a very long time because of the shortage of social housing. But what is new is that we are growing the team. We are looking again at the incentives that we can give landlords to enable them to deliver properties at local housing allowance rates, which is what the incentives are for. Yeah, it's not just a bung that people make a lot of money. It's so that we have affordable accommodation for our clients. And yes, it can be quite expensive, and it's something that we keep saying to the government. You know, that where there is a shortage of accommodation, where we have to work in the private rented sector, in places like London, in Bristol, in Brighton, it can be very expensive to prevent homelessness. And we will look at things like topping up rents, etc., to prevent somebody from becoming homeless in the first place. Absolutely. Then rent control, I think probably. So yeah, sure. You know, there's the whole living rent commission piece, wasn't there? That had a number of different actions within there. It isn't mentioned explicitly in there, but I need to check with Alfie. I thought maybe something was around lobbying, because we know it isn't a power that we have at the moment, but there is quite a strong section in the strategy around lobbying government for changes. And one of the things that we're really keen on, and other colleagues in the sector are keen on, is that we can't just keep chasing private rents with increasing local housing allowance rates. The things that need to be done are ways of controlling rents and keeping them low. But at the moment, we don't have a legal way of doing that.
I'm conscious this is our first item, so we really need to move on. This is a key decision because it affects more than 2 wards. Rose, can you read the recommendations, please?
So the Office of Recommendations is that the Committee for Homes and Housing Delivery approves the Homelessness and Rough Sleeping Strategy 2025 to 2030 and accompanying action plan for 2025.
Fine. I'm happy to move that. Do I have a seconder? Zoe, thanks. All those in favour? Unanimous. We then move on to the second item, which is Paul's tackling homelessness transformation update. This is for information. We get it quarterly. Paul.
Thank you. Yes. So yeah, this second quarterly update that we're providing. And like I said, there are many colleagues working on the programme, and in addition to colleagues in the housing leadership team who are sat alongside me, I've got Joanne White, who's the programme manager, and Jessie Wild, who's one of our transformation leads, sitting there behind me. They may come in for any technical support around answers to questions. Very briefly on this, because this is for noting. So the report sets out the scope of the programme, the areas of work and objectives, and the work falls into 4 main areas. We've got increasing the supply of temporary accommodation, new use of registered providers, increasing access to the private rented sector, and homelessness prevention. So in the last quarter, we've made good progress in these 4 areas. I'll just give some examples from the report of things that we've done. So on the supply side of things, we've had an acquisitions pilot. We're taking a business case, a strategy and resources to acquire 75 properties to use as temporary accommodation. We're leasing modular units for temporary accommodation, and we carried out an extensive consultation on using council homes as temporary accommodation, which we'll talk about later. New use of registered providers, we've commissioned a report looking at how the council can get best value out of working with registered providers and supported accommodation. In terms of accessing the private rented sector, Fiona mentioned earlier that we're working with an organisation called Beam, who help clients into employment and then match them into private rented tenancies. It's something that's worked really well in other high demand areas, worked particularly well in parts of London, Brent and Greenwich in particular. And then our homelessness prevention and demand work, I've already talked about the service redesign earlier in a previous response. The report goes on to talk about the programme costs and the reduction in overspend for last year, for this year to date, and the targets for 25-26. And this is set out in sections 20 and 21. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Paul. I think it certainly demonstrates that the work we have can be translated into action. So, and it's some positive achievements in my view, but though it's clearly still work in progress. Joss?
Apologies. Thank you very much, Chair. In section 2020, beg your pardon, there's no actual cost reduction delivery for 24-25. So we're just wondering what the reduction figures moving forward, the expectation would be. And the second part of my question is the target reductions for subsidy loss and overspend, the recurring nature of it, and the actual cost reduction delivered. Is that an accumulative figure? Why is this recurring? Thank you.
Thank you. So I'm going to look to my colleagues on the second row to come in, if that's okay. So Joe, did you want to?
Yep, sorry. Which one did you say there wasn't? I'm looking at the table now. 25, 20, was it 24, 25?
It's the forecast for 24, 25. Is the actual cost reduction delivered?
Right, yes. So there's 2.3 million delivered so far, as at the 12th of November for 24, 25.
And what are the predictions? Sorry, what are the predictions for moving forward?
Okay, yeah. So we're actually predicting to over deliver. I think it's at 4 point something. I can't remember. Our forecast at the moment is around 4 million. So overachieving against the target of 3.59. I can get you later the exact figure. That'd be helpful.
Are there any more points? In which case, can I thank you for the report, Rose? Can we have the recommendations, please?
You can indeed. So the recommendations are that the Committee of Homes and Housing Delivery notes the report states that the Tackling Homelessness programme's financial objectives include 3,593,000 of recurring subsidy loss reduction in 24-25 and a further 4,634,000 of recurring subsidy loss in reduction 25-26. The programme is working on additional initiatives that will result in even further subsidy loss reduction, amount to be confirmed. Number 2, that the committee notes the report states that as per rebaselining at CLB on the 12th of November 2024, the Tackling Homelessness programme budget is 2,743,165 for 24-25 plus contingency held centrally by CLB. And number 3, that the committee notes that per baselining at CLB on 28th of May 2024, no funding has yet been approved for 25-26, but is expected to be around 1,633,348 for 25-26, excluding the new uses of RP projects.
Bearing in mind we only had one question, I'm going to leave.
I noted that it said one of our largest providers of emergency accommodation didn't join our framework on page 185. Am I looking at the right thing?
I think that's the next report.
Okay, great. Or I'm ahead of myself. Okay.
You're ahead of the game again, Jerry. So we've heard the actual officer recommendation. I move that, we note that, we don't need to vote on it. We'll move to item 9, which is framework contract for temporary accommodation. Paul?
Thank you. So this report is asking for approval to enter into another contract with Click Travel starting in January 2025 to March 26 with a contract value of 1.8 million. So this is a relatively straightforward report and very similar to the report that came to the first committee meeting where we asked you to note an emergency key decision to enter into a contract with Click Travel. We didn't anticipate that we'd be back to committee so soon, and I'll talk about the reasons for that in a minute. So the report gives context on homelessness pressures and the Tackling Homelessness programme, which through this work on increasing supply and improving prevention outcomes will help us end the use of hotels as emergency accommodation. So just a quick recap, Click Travel is an online portal for booking hotel rooms and is free to use and provides a 5% discount on room prices. So this is a council-wide contract to meet the emergency accommodation needs of all clients of the council services where there is no other suitable accommodation. We're by far the biggest user, but colleagues in adult social care, children's service and our landlord service also use this. So when we're looking at use and spend, so table 1 shows the number of households in hotels at the end of each month. I'm pleased to say that as of yesterday, we're back down to 43. So we had a little increase in November, but on the sort of reducing trajectory, which is great. And table 2 shows the spend for the year so far. So the question around why has hotel use not reduced as quickly as we had expected, and why am I back to committee only after a matter of months after being here before? So in section 17, we talk through that. So picking up on a potential question, we had one of our largest private temporary accommodation providers refusing to join the new framework. So just as a reminder, the new framework capped the prices that providers could charge. A number of people organisations initially decided not to work with us, but we've managed to bring them on. But this one provider said it doesn't work for them in terms of the money that they're going to get back, so they have decided not to work with us. They would work with us for more, but this is a framework. We've got capped prices. We just can't do that. We've got to stick to our guns. So that has meant that the 150, 180 households that were in their accommodation, when they move out, that accommodation is no longer available to us, so our supply is reducing. And another one of the providers has recently sold at auction some of their family units, which have gone back into the pool of housing in Bristol, but just not as temporary accommodation. The other two things around the work that we're doing on the framework to bring new providers on and supported accommodation. So we have had new people join the emergency accommodation framework, but most of them so far providing units for single clients and nothing for families, so we're working on that. And whilst we've onboarded new providers onto the supported family framework earlier in the year, we haven't yet brought properties on yet, and we're working hard for this to happen, and some will be coming online in the new year. So our revised plan is for a steady decrease in use of hotels over the next 15 months, with the estimated costs as set out in table 3. Thank you.
Board, Joss.
Thank you, Chair. A couple of things, really. I mean, it's sad that we still have to use hotels, and I mean, that's regrettable, but the trajectory is positive, and obviously your update is even better than the November date, so we've come down, 4 since November, which is very positive. I just wonder, obviously, we're getting a 5% discount from using this portal, and they're not charging it kind of just begs the question, where are they making the money? So are the people who are selling the hotel rooms to us, are they having to take a financial hit as well? So they're getting 5% discount, plus they're having to pay a fee to be on that site. Is that why they're exiting the market?
Okay, so Click Travel is just for accessing hotels. Yep, so completely nothing to do with our emergency accommodation framework. And sorry, too many frameworks, I think, which just maybe confuse things. So we've got the private landlords who have accommodation that are on our emergency accommodation framework, and this is just about us securing hotel rooms when we don't have any other suitable temporary accommodation. But Click works very much like many other travel portals, where if you book a holiday through somebody, they take a cut from the people where the hotel rather than from you, and that's just standard business practice, I believe. Yeah.
I think my question was, is that why people are exiting the market, because they're taking a 5% hit, because we're getting 5% discount, plus they're having to pay a fee on that site. So that's a disincentive for them to make themselves available.
All right, no, so sorry. Again, I'm not making myself
It's probably me.
clear. No, it probably is me. It's too many frameworks, I think, Joss. So the people that are exiting are private landlords who own their own accommodation or they lease it. This is purely the hotel chains in Bristol that we're accessing accommodation for. So, apologies. Too many frameworks. Yeah.
Jorain.
So we've got 150 houses from one landlord who are refusing to join the emergency accommodation framework.
That's right.
So do we know where those houses are going to go?
We don't. We have asked.
And what percentage is that as a percentage of the emergency family accommodation that we've got? Because obviously that's a huge loss. And it does raise the question of whether we got our pricing right and whether we got enough flexibility on getting that negotiation with that large landlord.
That's all good points. And we spent quite a long time on the price point to make sure that actually it was still competitive. It was cheaper than before. But if you have private accommodation in Bristol and you're up for managing it as temporary accommodation, you still make money out of this more than you would do renting it as private renting. I take some comfort that the price point was right because we have 18 organisations on the framework. We just have this one who've decided not to work with us and who I think feel that we will come back at some point with a better deal for them. So it's a commercial decision.
And as a percentage of the number of family homes that we've lost?
I'd need to go back and check if that's okay. I can get back to you. Yeah.
Okay.
We've got Ed and Sib next. Can we take them together?
Thank you very much, Chair. So I just had a couple of questions. Relating to this. Firstly, I think it's clear already, but just for the avoidance of any doubt for anyone in the room, can you assure us that the use of a hotel accommodation will always remain a measure of last resort from this authority, and tell us a bit more about some of the mitigations we're putting in place, such as buying up properties and building temporary accommodation. The other thing I just wanted to flag is on page 183 of the report, so just the second page of this committee report, paragraph number 4. There's some parenthesis that said that the figures there referring to temporary placements and temporary accommodation exclude the placements for Barton House residents, and I just wonder if you could explain why those figures have been excluded. From the report. Thank you.
Okay. Yep, thank you very much. The first one was around a commitment to ending hotels and only using them as a last resort. Yeah, absolutely. That commitment is there. We know, as working with people that are homeless, that hotel accommodation isn't good, particularly for families. You're very restricted around, food preparation, and we're really keen to stop its use as soon as we can. And one of the key focuses of the Tackling Homelessness programme and also the using General Needs Council housing is TAs, that we grow that supply of temporary accommodation that better meets people's needs, so that we can really stop using hotels. We're not alone. Lots of local authorities are having to use hotels, but we're really wanting to do something to end that. And I think I'm really pleased, like Josh said, with those recent figures that it's at 43. In terms of the second question, is why these figures not include any placements in temporary accommodation for Barton House residents. So I think it was just the decision was made at the time. If you want to know how many Barton House residents were in hotels at any point in time, we can let you know. But I think a decision was made in the sort of returns that were done around homelessness statistics to not include those people, because at that point in time decisions had been made on the homelessness applications and there wasn't any sort of live homelessness duty. Quite a technical thing, but if you want to know any more detail, we can let you know afterwards.
Sib.
This is a broader question around temporary accommodation in linkage with equalities impact assessment, mainly, and our financial situation. So the temporary accommodation market is one that's worth £2.9 billion across the UK. So it is at the mercy of those that are able to provide accommodation. I'm pleased that that hotel has decided not to play ball, or our pricing is effective that they've decided not to join, which is a good thing. It's leading to better accommodation. However, in this marketplace, at the moment, we're seeing disproportional access and support, like raised in the equalities impact part. So I just want to ask the team and John, in terms of how far are we able to stretch, A, our social value within the contracts that we put out in these situations, B, workforce diversity, so that it reflects the diversity of the city, because looking at another provider in the city receiving government funding of close to 77 million, changing futures, for example. The lack of diversity within, well, what's online. And then we're saying that when we have consultations, we're finding it very hard to reach some communities. We are spending public money to provide services, but when we need support, we're not able to get it back. Can we use our purchasing power, like we have with this one provider, to really put change in the marketplace?
I mean, that feels like a wider question, like you say, than the subject matter for this report. I don't know if anybody else wanted to come in. John?
Yes, thank you, Councillor. I mean, we've talked before, haven't we, about the opportunity to really leverage this across the area. So obviously there's the existing social value work that we do, but I think there is an opportunity to further leverage that in the work that we do. So I'm very happy to have another discussion with you about it, if that'd be helpful.
We're on item 9. I'm going to move this on because I'm conscious we've got a heavy agenda. This is a key decision because of the monetary amount. Rose, could you read the recommendation?
The Office of Recommendations are that the Committee for Homes and Housing Delivery authorises the Executive Director of Growth and Regeneration, in consultation with the Chair of the Homes and Housing Delivery Committee, to take all steps required to increase the contract value with Click Travel by an additional 1.8 million until March 2026 to secure hotel accommodation for clients who are homeless, in line with the procurement routes and maximum budget envelopes outlined in this report. And number 2, that the committee authorises the Executive Director of Growth and Regeneration to invoke any subsequent extensions or variations specifically defined in the contracts being awarded up to the maximum budget envelope outlined in this report.
Fine, thank you. I move that. Can I? Zoe, thanks. All those in favour? That's unanimously passed. Finally, Paul, last but no means least, using general needs housing as temporary accommodation, please.
Thank you, Chair. So this paper presents an opportunity to use properties that become available for letting from our stock of general needs.
I think at this point it'd be really useful to understand how we're going to do this, because it's a bit of a process, isn't
yes,
there
is
today?
indeed.
And I just wondered whether it might be useful for anybody watching and for us.
I was actually going to outline that after Paul spoke.
My apologies then.
I may actually do it before. After the presentation, there'll be a chance for some questions, of course. We then have to discuss the first recommendation. Are we as a committee minded to actually approve this as a scheme in principle? So then we have a decision there. We have a vote. Then this is an options paper. It's not coming with the officers saying we're recommending X or Y. It actually allows the committee to look at 4 different options so we can vote. Councillor Parsons and myself have discussed it. I'm going to move my favoured option. If that commands the support of members, that's fine. If not, it falls and we move on to the other options. Finally, assuming we've actually agree an option, and we've agreed the principle of the scheme. The third recommendation is actually to delegate to the director and the chair of the committee to take it further. So is that clear, Joss?
Just for a bit of clarity, so we'll start with the lowest number first and then ratchet up, or are we going to do it?
I think it will be easier to suggest what the Councillor Parsons and myself think is the best option, and if that falls, we'll move to another one. It will be up to a member of the committee to raise it and propose the option, if that's clear. Paul?
Thank you. Yeah. So, so this paper presents an opportunity to use properties that become available for letting from our stock of general needs housing as temporary accommodation for a period of 2 years, with a review after 1 year. This will provide homes for people in a housing emergency to live in while the council assesses their housing needs and they wait for a more permanent home. Decision is required on whether this should go ahead and what the annual limit should be on the number of properties transferred. So again, the report sets out the context of TA demand and information on the Tackling Homelessness programme. I'm putting out some key points here. As previously stated, this initiative will help us to end our use of hotels as emergency accommodation. It's important to note this is not a permanent change in use. Yeah, really important, this isn't a permanent change in properties, will always be temporary accommodation. Properties will be converted back into general needs when there is no longer a need, and it is the intention that other work streams within the programme seeking to increase the stock of both temporary accommodation provision and general needs housing will work alongside this work stream to enable these homes to revert back to general needs use in the future. And this initiative does deliver significant cost reduction. But there are impacts on groups of people directly. Should I carry on? And then?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. So those who are experiencing homelessness and need temporary accommodation, there's a positive impact because of the better quality of TA that's provided. However, those who are on the housing register waiting for general needs tenancy and those already in a general needs tenancy but are waiting to be transferred, there are negative impacts because they're going to be waiting longer, particularly if they need 2 and 3 bedroom properties, which is our focus of accommodation for this initiative. So we ran a 12-month pilot that ended in July. There was a comprehensive review of that pilot was carried out, and further details of the impacts are set out in sections 22 to 32. But to continue with the reallocation scheme beyond the pilot period, we needed to consult. So we ran a consultation between 20th of August and the 1st of October. It was clear that we needed to consult with all secure tenants, specifically those who are most affected, i.e. those who are on the housing waiting list. The level of response was lower than we would have liked. We had 162, back to the point that's made earlier around lessons being learned around consultation. And the consultation was quite straightforward, really. It comprised information about the proposal and a very short survey that said, do you agree with the proposal? Do you have any comments? The results showed that 55% of respondents disagreed with the proposal, 38% agreed and 8% either didn't agree. We're in the middle. Section 34 sets out the 4 options that, for the committee to consider if it is agreed to continue with this initiative, ranging from 9 to 18 properties a month, and the resulting reduction in overspend is set out in that table.
Thank you, Paul. We just moved to questions initially, but can I remind members, we did have a briefing last week about this and a chance to ask officers questions. We also invited advanced questions. Certainly Councillor Peat and Councillor Stone responded, and that those responses have been shared with the committee. So bearing in mind the detail here and the length of the agenda, could I please respectfully ask for focused, selective questions? Lisa.
Okay, first. Okay, right. So thanks very much for the report, and thanks very much. Now, first of all, I'd like to just make sure that we are mindful of those of the responses from the consultation. Okay, but But having said that, I had the privilege yesterday of going around to see avoid some...
Lisa, sorry. It's going to be quite difficult to arrange this, but we're in a couple of oral questions, then we'll move to debate.
Okay.
So don't make a statement, please.
All right, okay. Well, my question is that if we're going to deliver a high proportion of general needs on temporary accommodation, I would like to know that resources are provided to meet those needs, because resources, if we don't provide those resources, then we're really setting ourselves up to fail.
Thank you, Councillor Stone. That's a really good point, and apologies if that didn't come across in the paper. So yes, we need people to manage and these temporary accommodation units and to support people in their tenancies, and part of the Tackling Homelessness programme. There is allocated funding for services in my team to grow as we're taking on more temporary accommodation units, but we're also acutely aware that that there may be additional impacts on services that colleagues manage, particularly in Craig's service, who are repairing and kitting out the temporary accommodation units, and that is something that Craig and I have eyes on in terms of making sure that we have the resources we need.
Could I just add, Councillor Stone shared her concerns with me. They're equally issues I have, and I'm sure Councillor Parsons here. So we will have to ensure there is sufficient resources for the team. I'm conscious you're sitting next to Martin Johnston. Now, hopefully you'll still have friends afterwards. Zoe?
Two extremely short questions. So I'm aware that the Green Party promised that Barton House residents would be put in band 1.
Could I suggest you don't make a party
No, it's not. No, I'm just saying that the Barton House residents, they were promised to be put into band 1, and I'm just a little bit concerned. But how is it?
Zoe,
can you just let me finish my question and it will make sense?
It's quite clear. As I remarked to the lady in the public gallery, Councillor Parsons and I had an initial report about this issue on Monday, which is only work in progress, because clearly we actually need further equality impact info, and the councillors in Lawrence Hill will join us in the new year when we have a detailed report. But I think you're in danger with respect of conflating a serious, troubling, continuing issue with actually our needs to provide homelessness temporary accommodation. I think that's a bit of a sidetrack. Are there any other questions?
Yeah, so the other one isn't related to this one at all, but if you say it's not related, that's fine. The other one was the HRA were meant to acquire 150 properties this year. How many have they acquired so far?
I don't have an answer to that, so colleagues.
I think realistically we haven't got a rep from housing delivery here. So I'm sure offline they can actually, or online they can come back to you.
I could probably answer that. Bear with me.
Can I suggest, in the meantime, while John's
Yes, is that okay?
you go ahead. Zoe, did I see Lisa, sorry? No.
No, but I do recall at the beginning of this conversation with your intro, you did say we were purchasing 75 and we were also going on to purchase 50. So that'd be 125,
Yes,
wouldn't it?
but that's acquisitions for temporary accommodation as part of the homelessness strategy. I believe questions seem to have been exhausted. So in that case...
Chair, I found it, so apologies for the delay. So it is slightly complicated because there's different strands of the acquisitions programme, as I think you're probably aware. So the pilot, which was to purchase 25 properties over 2 years, 13 of those have been completed with a further 6 under offer and a further 6 to be purchased next year with the remaining budget. So that the overall total of that will be 25. Under the SHAP programme, that has now had 7 completed with a further 6 under offer. So the intention was to purchase 15 in 24-25. So we're slightly behind with that. Similarly, the LAF programme, there was 30 local authority funding programme, I think that one is, isn't it? There were 37 homes to be acquired over 2 years. We are expecting 19 to complete this year, and 18 were scheduled for 25-26. Of the larger acquisition programme and those that are also scheduled for 25-26, those are under review as part of the HRI business plan process for next year. So we haven't been progressing those at the moment. So a relatively small number have been completed.
So out of the 150, how many?
3 are under offer at present, but we have paused that due to the ongoing HRA business plan. But as I said, there are a number of other properties under the other programmes which have been progressed because they are funded separately.
Thank you.
Can I move to the first stage of debate? So to clarify this is just about the principle, whether the committee is minded to support this proposal to use some general needs housing. We're not stipulating how much at present to help meet our homelessness commitment and reduce the cost, of course, to the housing subsidy. I'll just actually say my penny if I see at least there are several hands up already. As I've indicated previously, in my view, homelessness, addressing that sits at the very top of the challenges in this city. The pain, the human misery is immense. And Lisa, I think, alluded to the consultation about this proposal we've done. I have to say it was clearly, I recognise it and respect it, the settled community who perhaps want to move to a larger house or a house in a different part of the city, they're more likely to respond than people who are homeless or rough sleepers. In my view, we actually have a first duty to actually respond to that. So there is the human cost of that, and you know that from your own postbags as councillors, of course. There also is, and we always have to be aware of the huge cost to this housing budget, but we're presently losing £40 million per annum in lost housing subsidy, which is a huge amount. So we have duty, in my view, in financial terms, to seek to reduce that loss. So in principle, I'm very much in favour of that, and I know if he was here, Councillor Barry Parsons would be in as well. Joss and then Lisa and then Zoe.
Thank you very much, Chair. I just want to come back to John's response to Zoe's question regarding the acquisition of properties, because I could see the politics all over her face at the time, and I can see really what the follow-up question is: when were these acquisitions started? Was it under this current administration, or was it under the previous administration? Because I think that might be quite relevant to the way that Zoe's thinking.
Joss, I appreciate you're trying to level the fiddle, of course, and I have to say it's very clear to me and Councillor Parsons, the previous housing delivery of the mayoral administration was hugely unrealistic and seemed more designed to catch newspaper headlines that actually address housing need. And you know, that, in my view, is one of the reasons why the social housing regulator stepped in, and through Savills, etc., we know the condition, our failures regarding our current housing stock, which we're seeking to address now, of course, through the Customer Standards Project Board. But we're dealing now with actually this proposal, and I'd like, with respect, to keep it targeted on that.
With all due respect, Chair, that seemed like a very politically loaded statement.
Zoe, please, I appreciate you're the only socialist councillor here, so perhaps you feel it's incumbent upon you to fight your corner, but actually this policy committee is here to actually determine policy, non-party, cross-party, and not to defend or not any particular political programme. Lisa.
Okay, so thanks very much. And I'd just like to again refer to the general needs being changed into a temporary accommodation. Well, first of all, temporary accommodation, from what I saw yesterday, which I was very privileged to have a look at, a newly fitted out temporary accommodation, which would be ready to go if we choose to go down this route. Obviously, it hasn't been chosen yet, but ready to go. And the standards are far higher than general accommodation standards. I mean, they have carpets, they have fitted kitchens, they have showers. I mean, these standards are pretty cool. I mean, I was very impressed by the standards when I walked out of that property. Now, the reason why I'm mentioning this is because obviously for where I'm concerned in this debate is that where we can, we should be actually looking at the higher amounts of properties, okay, on the list. Because of those reasons, because we will uplift those accommodations, which will actually eventually go back into our general needs. So therefore, we will actually provide better accommodation in the long run for people, whether they're temporary or in general needs, if we go through this process. And not only that, we actually also make a massive savings, at the end of the year on temporary accommodation costs. So, I just wanted to make that statement and bring in this into this conversation. This is why I had to ask the question on whether or not we are definitely going to provide those resources required for, like you say, Craig and other people and the voids teams as well, finding the voids and turning the voids around as quickly as possible into TAs. We definitely need that. Now, if we must make sure that that money is actually provided. Otherwise, we're going to set ourselves up to fail. And what's the point of trying to, hunt down a tiger when we end up with a cat, if that makes sense? Because we're trying to save £6 million. If we're not going to invest, it's invest to save, isn't it, at the end of the day?
Thank you, Lisa. Jeraine?
I'm kind of going to say something linked to your point anyway. I mean, I think supporting kind of Zoe's point across party lines, really. I mean, I do think the centrality of good performance indicators is really important. How we choose them, not having too many of them, really focusing on them. I think everybody across party lines can agree on those to get a better balance between delivery and policy design, and particularly given the range of challenges that we face. On this issue, this isn't where we want to be. This is one of the things we're having to do, not just in the face of a homelessness crisis, but with a ridiculous level of subsidy provided by national government. So we're having to rob Peter to pay Paul to do stupid things because of the rules that government has designed. So really, we should, as I do think we have to do this to protect the council's finances. And I think we should be constantly knocking on government's door saying, look at the stupid things that you are making councils do because you have got national policy wrong. So I think that balance between communications and what we have to do as workarounds needs to be improved. Or,
I
where the emphasis
couldn't agree
goes.
more, actually, Shireen. I think neither members or officers want to be in this position, but it's a realistic and positive way forward, in my view. Zoe?
So I very much appreciate why this proposal is here. I appreciate that putting people in hotels and hostels is expensive and it is hemorrhaging money. I really do appreciate that. But I think we all and I know we've got a bit party political now, but I'm genuinely speaking to each of you councillors now, not as a Labour person, but as someone who wants people to be in council housing that is their forever homes, okay? Putting people into temporary accommodation that should be going to them is adding a level of bureaucracy, because these are not tenancies, they are not protecting them for fitness for human habitation standards. The only incentive for us to deal with mould in these properties is because it's our stock and we don't want it to deteriorate. It's not because we are there for these people living here. There's so much in this report that's outlining about how we're going to make the temporary accommodation through the general stock suitable for the needs. But if it's suitable for the needs, then why aren't we providing it as council housing? So I'm imploring you all, please go against the whips. Don't vote for this. It's not right. These properties should be given to people as council homes, not as temporary accommodation. Are you really going to tell that 12-year-old girl that she's going to have to keep on moving homes until she's found a council house? It's not fair. If we've got the housing, it should be given as tenancies. And I know you all disagree with me, but I'm begging you, please, this should be council housing, not temporary accommodation.
Thank you, Zoe. Before moving to Sybil, I'm glad he signalled because he had some very helpful and positive experiences, which he mentioned at the briefing. So can I just say, I hope you realise I don't use the committee as a floor to make party political points or attacks, but I, like Zoe, am an opposition councillor. We are not members of this administration, but I play a role to the Green Chairman of this committee, Barry Clark, as his Vice Chairman, and I believe I have to play and should play, for Bristol's sake, a constructive role. Since May, my experience has been quite frightening because I've discovered an awful lot of what should have been done to actually keep our tenants' homes fit for purpose and safe by the previous cabinet member for housing, who is in fact the Labour group leader, was not done against officer advice in many cases. And as I say, a significant reason for our position of financial black hole is that actually the social housing delivery figures, it was wholly unrealistic, more designed for Marvin Rees's re-election.
Chair.
Sorry, Zoe, you've had your bit, I'm just having mine. So I believe we are actually seeking to address this cross-party and non-party. And I have to say, it's not just in Zoe's case, the Labour Party seeking to wash its hands, Pontius Pilate-like of this issue, but Pontius Pilate arguably wasn't instrumental in the judicial murder of Jesus Christ, but the present Labour leader was. Yes, I am, you're quite correct, but I was annoyed. Can I ask Sib to hopefully add rather more light than heat?
It's good to see the passion. As someone who has gone through temporary accommodation with my young family from not eviction, but the section, what's it? Yeah, the eviction notice. That's one. Yeah. In work, not even in work poverty, just bad credit score. Just bad credit score from an unpaid phone bill. You know, small things. But you couldn't find a property. Both myself and my partner working. And there we were, off to Severn Beach. And, you know, being in that situation was dreadful. But looking at the bill that the council was paying at that time, we were paying 550 rent. But the council was paying about £800 a month. No, 1,500 a month. We were shocked because, you know, what it looked like is like, well, if you paid this there, we could have stayed. But understandably, the landlord wants to sell his house. So that mismatch for us as a family was also quite a shock. And I could imagine for many families in temporary accommodation, that it looks like they could be put and supported somewhere else. Now, there's a lot of health, well-being issues that happen whilst in that situation and with young people. However, once you have a bit of certainty in a place, your health and well-being helps tremendously. Your career progression and everything else. And if it wasn't for that temporary accommodation and that first move, I wouldn't be here today. So I understand the positive impact of this, but that's just my personal element and our family personal experience of it. But now we're in a different situation. We've got a £51 million deficit. And equally, that housing is different to many other service provision is that we need to meet a balanced budget. If not, the estate that the council has could be taken from us, putting our residents in a different situation than what we could provide positivity to. And I guess it is with that merit in mind, with those both merits in mind, that we need to find positive solutions. And by making those savings, we're able to act should worse situations come about, like Barton Hill. If something that happened in Barton House happens again, and we are not in a good position financially, we can't respond. And it was, with those kind of three things in mind that, making a positive decision is really important.
Thank you, Sid, but the voice of sanity, though I suspect my personal endorsement won't actually feature on your election address, or if it did, it probably wouldn't do you any good. I've seen several hands. I'm not going to take them because this is going to be a long debate. We need to make progress. So the first vote is, in principle, whether this committee is minded to actually approve the use of some, in principle, general needs housing for actually towards temporary accommodation. I'm proposed to propose that. Sib, are you seconding? Thanks. All those in favour? All those against? So that was passed overwhelmingly. Thank you. We now move on to stage 2 for the amount. Now, I have to say, as I've indicated before, whilst I take a high review of consultation, the views which were overwhelmingly against this move of the settled community already have housing, in my view, is more likely to be registered than people who are in real human misery, who don't have homes. So I think, both for financial reasons, but also to actually address the housing need, we shall opt for a figure at the higher end of that. Councillor Parsons and I have discussed this at length, and unitedly we would like to propose that we move to up to 15 dwellings per month or so, option 3. This would be, as Paul Sylvester has said, reviewed for 2 years at least, reviewed in a year's time. I'm also conscious that as part of the Combating Homelessness programme, we're acquiring 75 dwellings, and after we've ceased to use them for temporary accommodation, they will revert to the HRA fund for general housing. So I believe that supports the rationale. That's my proposal. Over to you. Yeah, seconded. Joss, thank you. Therefore, it's been validly moved and seconded. It should be put to the vote immediately according to standing orders. I propose that Joss seconds. All those in favour of up to 15? Thank you. All those against? Zoe? So
Can I say one thing, Chair?
No.
please,
No.
and I'll be quiet.
You can issue a press release, but frankly, we don't want to. We have serious.
I have one thing to say.
We
please.
have. Well, you may have, but write me an email or do a press release. Let's not prolong the meeting. So the third recommendation, having to agree that. Rose, could you read that?
So the third recommendation is that the committee authorises the Executive Director of Growth and Regeneration in consultation with the Chair of the Homes and Housing Delivery Committee and the Director of Finance to take all steps to require to implement the decision of the under recommendations 1 and 2 to transfer properties that become available for letting in the stock of general needs housing to be used for temporary accommodation for a period of 2 years with a review after 1 year in accordance with the terms stipulated by the committee and as outlined in this report.
Thank you. I propose that, Joss.
Well, actually, I was going to ask a question on that
Yeah.
one, if that's possible. In terms of the acquisition for this new project, would that be as properties come available? Will it just be a blanket thing, or will you take a strategic view about that decision-making pathway? So the properties that become available, I'm asking about the properties that become available, will you take a strategic view about which ones go into that or go into the general needs?
So yes, so that's the programme that we operate at the moment. Take a strategic view based on where the units are and the size of unit.
Brilliant. That's fine. That's really useful because I think that level of clarity is really important.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thanks. So we have that proposed, seconded. All those in favour? All those against? 1. I pass overwhelmingly. Thank you. So thank you, Paul. That was a bit of a marathon. You're certainly well into. I'm pleased you actually had your annual break last policy committee. So you probably want one for the next one. So we'll now move on to Craig, who is actually talking. His report's about Waking Watch. I rather hope this is less contentious.
I'll try. Morning, committee. Firstly, apologies to the committee about not sending over the joinery shop accounts. They will definitely be with you very shortly. Okay, so in the interests of time, I'm going to assume that the committee have read the report, so I'm just going to pull out some key points around why I'm here today. So I'm here to seek approval for funding to continue the Waking Watch provision. Also then the other clauses you'll see around the delegated authority should it be approved today. I'll go past the evidence base for it and move into the current position of Bristol City Council and where we are. So we've currently got a DPS or dynamic purchasing system framework in place to be able to call off the existing Waking Watch provision. That's split into 3 areas across the city. So initially the contract terms fell within line of budget that was approved last year's business plan. And the Waking Watch provision was estimated to end in September 2024. So following a number of actions since that point and the EPS removal and fire alarms and sprinklers, that was where the September 2024 date came from. However, unfortunately, the Waking Watch provision still required due to 4 key contributing factors. So delays in the fire alarm installation programme as a result of contractor performance, profiling existing resource due to the temporary decant of Barton House, delays in the sprinkler programme due to some building safety regulator application approval process, which I'm reassured is getting better, and the need to divert resources to deliver additional fire safety provisions to other blocks, such as Barton House at the time. It's important to point out that back in 2022, when this provision was required, there was 38 blocks that needed fire alarms installed, and we're down to now 16 in total. Of the blocks listed in the report, 1 is completed, so that's come off already. 1 is due to complete this week, and 2 more are due to come off ahead of schedule in January instead of March. So the team are making real progress to try and expedite the programme. So due to the delays in the contracts have needed to be extended past their maximum value. So we're here today to seek approval for additional funding to continue the provision. So the quickest route to market will be us to amalgamate the 3 different call-offs into 1 now contract, because we've got a lot less Waking Watch required across the city, which is positive. However, there is some financial implications of this. So there's a current overspend of 4.5 million on the approved budget of 2.1 in the 2024 business plan. The 2 million that we're requesting today will be a proposal and subsidise the remaining 650k as part of this financial year, and we're going to push hard to obviously reduce that as much as we can through the other measures. So the contributing factor in point 12 is important to pull out. So when the programme was designed, it was based on before legislation landed around the PAS 9980s and the FRAEWs for the external walls, so the fire risk assessment for external walls. So programmes were designed to implement fire alarms, sprinkler programme that exists in there, and a convergence in between to minimise the wake and watch across the city. However, subsequent to those fire risk assessment external wall information coming back from qualified experts, realised that actually we needed further provision in place to stand down the wake and watch. So the officer recommendations today is to approve the expenditure and funding as set out in the report to provide wake and watch services for residents in our high risk blocks that still have EPS outstanding, and then to authorise the Executive Director in consultation with the Chair of the Homes and Housing Delivery Committee to take all steps required to extend the existing contracts and procure a new wake and watch contract in line with a compliant procurement process.
Thank you, Craig. I'm sure, well, obviously this is a key decision because of the contract value. I'm sure members may have questions about delays in the system, but to me this seems a no-brainer. Clearly, until these remedial works in our high-risk blocks are achieved, we have to maintain for the tenant's safety and security these processes. So I have no hesitation in endorsing it. Joss?
Thank you very much, Chair. Yeah, I'm with you on that. It's disappointing and regretful that we're in this position, obviously massively rising costs, which is shameful, really, considering the position that we're in financially in the city and within this department. And it's a real shame that we couldn't have got on top of this quicker. I'm just thinking about the impact on those residents. Although they are probably, I'm sure they're reassured that they've got a wake-in watch, the negative side of it is obviously, presumably they're feeling that there's still a risk to them. And the quicker we should have got on this programme quicker and managed it quicker. And it's with regret that we are going to have to put more money into this project for a longer period of time. So that's really all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thanks. Ed?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Clark. I would echo your comments there that the decades of decay and underinvestment has meant that this has become necessary to keep people safe. So I really think that's something for the previous administration to chew over a little bit, to be honest. We're in this position at all. I just had two questions around how Wake and Watch is implemented, and I'm pleased, and I congratulate you and the department on making sure that some of these have been delivered ahead of the schedule mentioned here. Firstly, one of the things that we know is important, particularly from the refurbishment taking place in the 4 blocks in St Jude's, is it's important to encourage and foster trust with our communities living in these blocks who will be going through a distressing time, no doubt. So I'd be interested to know how, tell us a bit about some of the ways that residents can hold their Wake and Watch to account to make sure that they get in the service they absolutely, that they not only expect, but absolutely need to have in terms of their safety. And it would be good just to talk, and I find it helpful as well if you can just talk through what some progress has been made in in how the standing down of Wake and Watch works once safety improvements have been made, particularly in those cases that you say are running ahead of schedule. Thank you.
Absolutely, thank you. How is the Wake and Watch implemented? So I just might need to ask a response. Where did the decision come from to implement it, or specifically operation? How is it implemented?
So it's not that. So the two questions were. Well, the second question was around talking through the process of implementing the standing down of Wake and Watch. But the first question was around ways that residents can hold their Wake and Watch to account to make sure they get in the service that is expected of them.
Yeah, thank you. So the team have got contract administrators who run the contract and also then run the exercise out on site. There's regular meetings with the contractor to share learning from each site and engage with communities. There's also work to make sure that communities feel engaged in that. I'll take an action to bring something back to you to give you a robust evidence base on how people can engage in it, and it's really important that we feel that it's meaningful, people can co-design in that experience for their blocks. How the Waking Watch is stood down is following checking from internal officers that the suitable mitigation or remediation works has been completed on the block to lower the risk to a sufficient value that does not require the Waking Watch provision to be in place, is then ratified and signed off through the governance pathway internally at Bristol, clarified with Avon Fire and Rescue as the local fire authority, and then process sent out to stakeholders.
Zoe?
You've mentioned that there are delays in the fire alarm installation programme as a result of contractor performance. Have the fire alarms been procured? Have you got the contractors lined up? And how have have you essentially planned for them to be installed within every high rise?
Yes, contracts procured. There's 2 different contracts across different parts of the city. One performing very well. Where the lack of performance comes in other parts of the city, there's significant extensive contract meetings to hold them to account for the KPIs that are within the contracts to complete that as quickly as possible. So,
Do you mind just saying, like, why have there been delays? Like, no pressure, just want to know.
Normal contract issues from supply chain issues to source the materials because we're doing it across 38 blocks, as well as unfortunate delays due to on-site contractor performance.
Great, thank you.
Lisa?
Okay, my question is simply about, it's more of a general question, to be honest with you, and it's something I've been trying to weave in throughout this whole kind of like this whole committee. So obviously, due to the many years of decades of decay and underinvestment, what my question is seriously, John, is that when are we going to have the investigation into Barton House? Because I've been asking this of Barry, the chair, many times in pre-meets, asking when is it that we are going to have the investigation into Barton House. I thought it was going to be on this agenda, but it's been dropped off. It is part and parcel of this, because at the end of the day, if we can learn from an investigation in Barton House, we can actually implement this into things that come up in the future. And I know this is about whether or not we're going to provide, a Waking Watch to other high rise, but that kind of leads into that very question.
So just to reassure you, Councillor, in terms of learning the lessons from what happened at Barton House, we've done a lot of work internally on that. So, we take very seriously what happened and take the learning, have learnt those lessons, both in terms of how we, look at and the structure of blocks, which was obviously at the heart of that issue, but also how we manage any situation like that in the future. But in terms of any further investigation, I think that's something to discuss with the chair rather than myself.
Thanks for the report, Craig. And what I'm looking at here in terms of the impact assessment is that the Wake and Watch team are also involved with resident engagement. Is that right?
They do engage with residents, absolutely.
Okay, so in doing so, I guess there's a bit of better understanding of what the impact is of Wake and Watch and so forth, because in some of the blocks where we've been doing some resident engagement, what people are saying is that they feel safer. For example, in Kingsdown, there's lack of CCTV cameras there. It's dark. There's a lot of rough sleeping that takes place, so people feel safer. However, that creates an expectation that obviously when the service stops, we've got a service gap, or an expectation that people have had something, it's gone, and they saw the importance that it has. How would we implement some of the recommendations that is found from the Wake and Watch, where residents feel they really prefer the presence of people being on site? Yeah.
Do you want to go?
Mine isn't working, so thank you, Chair. So I think that's a sort of holistic question, because it's not necessarily a question that's strictly
Yes,
It's not a question that's strictly related to Waking Watch, because of course Waking Watch's purpose is less about the community and how we make people feel safe, and more about the high-rise block and fire safety. However, I think the space there needs to be occupied by the work that needs to be done around housing officers and being proactive and visible on our estates.
Yeah.
And that's something we've talked about. I know the service is working on that, making sure that that is actually happening. So the walkabouts, it should be around how we're engaging that community and being more visible and engaging with councillors and other key stakeholders to fill that space. And it should be about making sure that we have more resident engagement and involvement around how our estates are managed and that sort of work. So I think it's slightly an aside from Waking Watch, because that isn't actually the purpose of Waking Watch.
Yeah, and you could see how it links with resident engagement, and hopefully when we move to that kind of piece of work, there should be feedback about, fire escape, how do residents do it? It should be part and parcel. We had we had a team come to put some fire safety signs on the block. When they put the signs, they put the sign for evacuation and the sign that says the point to meet, but they didn't write where the point to meet is. So I see the signs, but I still don't know where the point to meet place is. And I'm also thinking about, okay, what is the training? Like we have the alarm system here, the training, maybe, once a while you go to a particular site and you train. Is that also something that the Wake and Watch team actually do in terms of making sure that residents are aware, if there's a fire exit, this is how you do it in a practical way? Or are they literally just walking around the block?
The Wake and Watch provisions there to give earliest indication in event of an emergency and to support evacuation, not to that level of detail to direct everybody to a point, is to initial response, get out, be safe.
Right,
I'll finish off, Chair, by saying, is there a program or in something that's more about working with residents to better understand the fire evacuation process?
Absolutely, that's a really great takeaway that we can come back to our resident engagement team and can feature on agenda for some of our service user groups as well. So I'll take that away as an action.
I'm conscious that there are 2 hands up, but we really need to progress. Could I therefore ask Rose to read the recommendation?
So the recommendations are that the Committee for Homes and Housing Delivery approve the expenditure as set out in this report to continue providing Waking Watch services to the required high-risk blocks until the remediation works have been completed via existing programmes of work in line with the proposals set out above in the report. And number 2 is to authorise the Executive Director for Growth and Regeneration, in consultation with the Chair of the Homes and Housing Delivery Committee, to take all steps required to extend existing contracts and procurement and award the new Waking Watch contract in line with the procurement routes and maximum budget envelopes outlined in this report.
Thank you. I move. Is there a second? Zoe, thank you. All those in favour? Unanimous. Thank you, Craig. Can we have Richard James, I completed your names, the Housing Consumer Standards Programme update?
Yes, thank you. Okay, the update report's got quite a few sections, so I'll just summarise it really quickly. There's a couple of areas that I'm going to ask the committee to give their views, and then of course you're open to ask your own questions after that as well. The first 3 items within the update refer to the performance of the programme and general performance reporting. So I'll just talk through those in summary first, because I assume you've read the papers. So items 1 to 3 gives an improvement plan update, a performance report on how we're doing against the backlog works, and then a performance report on all of our overall performance, which does include backlog and the business as usual position. The themes that come out of the 3 items and appendix A1, A2 and A3 summarised really in that good progress is being made against asbestos communal area inspections, and that programme has been completed. Also good progress is being made against water safety inspections, and that programme has also been completed. You will also be able to see that significant progress is being made on smoke detection and electrical inspections. The main areas of challenge that you will see within the report relate to damp and mould. There's a lot of work going on to understand the data position and to really develop robust processes to be able to respond to that at pace, and also around fire remedial actions, which again we are working really hard to generate the same momentum that we have on the electrical inspections and remedial works. On this, there's one question from me to the committee that under Appendix A3, you'll have seen quite a detailed performance report document, and just a question for consideration for the committee around that item was around the format. I'm aware it's quite detailed, it's quite operational. We wanted to share it with you because this is the information we're providing to the regulator, but I was hoping to get your view on whether you want to see a more summarised version of that going forward rather than that detailed document going forward. Do you want me to take questions on that, or should I go through the introduction first?
Do the introduction, then take questions.
And then take questions, yeah, fine. Item 4 was around the strategic housing review, so the root cause analysis for that. We've shared that with the Housing Committee, and we've also shared it with the regulator. Again, it would be good to get some of your views on that. One key point that came from the regulator, which I think is really valid, was that the strategy document in the appendix is deliberately quite focused on responding to the regulatory judgment and the mainly issues within the quality and safety consumer standard. It does refer to all of the other consumer standards, but it is more heavily focused on that. The regulator's view, and probably officer's view, is should we strengthen all of the other areas to ensure we've got a fuller response to all of the consumer standards, so there's no surprises when the regulator does their regulatory review, rather than the narrower focus. So that's a question would be good to have a debate on. And then just really quickly so item 6 was just a summary of resident feedback from the Housing Scrutiny Panel and the Winter Housing Forum. You'll be able to see in the pack those questions. There's some questions around quality of service. There are also some questions around BCC's broader approach to social housing, its social housing stock, and there's some comments there about how we conduct resident engagement activities. And then just very quickly, item 7, I won't go into this in any detail at all, but there was a summary there about our latest meeting with the regulator.
Thanks, Richard. Joss, and then I was going to say I had to cut out Jerome and Zoe. If you've got any questions, I'll take them. Joss.
Thank you very much, Chair. It's good that we're moving forward. Obviously, we're moving forward at pace, but maybe not as quickly as anybody would have liked, because we need to, there's some real basics that we still haven't got on top of. That's very, very clear. I think probably the most important thing to come out of this report is we have to understand how we got here and make sure that we never get ourselves into this position ever again. I think you raised a point about doing a full-bodied analysis of all the indices that we need to be addressing, so that we have a direction of travel on all the indices that will be reported on later. And I think that that's a really good idea, because it's incumbent upon us as a committee to never go back to the situation that we found ourselves in 12 months ago. So thank you very much for this report, but it is definitely work in progress. But I would welcome your recommendation for having some analysis of all the indices that we're going to be reported on, so that we just keep an eye on it. Thank you.
Fine, thanks. Jerome.
Thank you. I think, I mean, kind of following on from Josh's point, I think we're basically playing catch up for years of kind of underinvestment in basic inspection and testing routines. And I think if we can kind of distinguish between what is catch up and what we then need to embed on an ongoing basis, so that we don't fall back into this position, and what the kind of the annual financial costs of that are, and the staff structures, etc., that would be really helpful. The other point I want to pick up is kind of damp and mould, where you mentioned that there's a kind of specialist team. It would be good to see some kind of summary overview of what the damp and mould problems are across the portfolio. What are the commonalities? Is it old buildings where there are cracks and damps getting in, or is it lack of ventilation? And what are the different type of fixes that we can get in place, so that we've got a kind of management overview and an analysis of the best categories of approach, so that we can approach this issue in the best way, really.
Thank you. Okay, the first question, absolutely. We are planning to implement the new strategic performance reporting from April. So for the new financial year, we're still working away to develop that, and that will include much more visibility around our compliance position going forward. Just to pick out the other thing is sort of looking back. So that's the KPI, the key performance indicator reporting. I think looking back on the root cause session that's going to be carried out, that is very much going to be focused on to make sure we've got a shared understanding of how and why we didn't meet the regulatory obligations, and making sure that we've got confidence there's no gaps in the improvement plan, and ensure that the right things are being done to address that, and also to avoid future mistakes and learning going forward. So that will come to the next committee meeting, I think, in February. On the second questions about reporting, yes, we understand it's quite a complex position at the moment, because we've got reporting on the backlog and reporting on business as usual. We are working hard to try and bring that together into one performance pack, and we'll definitely be there by the end of financial year, but we are trying to make it more digestible internally, and that's a real focus. On the damp and mould, we have a huge amount more data and intelligence than we have had before on damp and mould. So I'm very happy to put in more detail into the next update, which will give a much more clarity about that. We've set up a specific performance report which very clearly shows where all the damp and mould is, how old it is, how severe it is. So we'll be able to share that with you to give you a more in-depth level of information for next meeting, definitely.
Lisa.
Yes, I have a couple of points, thanks. First of all, I'd just like to refer to the budget, to the budget proposals. In the budget proposals, it says you are going to drop dealing with small unurgent damp and mould conditions. And obviously, reading this report, we've got damp and mould conditions. So I'd just like to reflect on that, because obviously, unurgent damp and mould conditions do turn into urgent damp and mould conditions in the future. So I'd really look at that budget proposal before we actually move on. So that's one of my things I'd like us to have a look at. The second thing is that conditioning reports and surveys are reasonably expensive, I would imagine. How can we incentivise our tenants to actually come forward? I mean, a lot of tenants are incredibly there can be eye, ears, and witnesses on certain conditions in homes, in their homes. And some tenants do actually need a lot of support. But if we could support tenants into realising that we're here to actually support them, then we may actually provide, in the long run, we could actually really tackle some of these issues before they become massively over issue, if that makes sense.
Yes. So on those two questions, for the damp and mould, we are going to respond to all damp and mould. That's what our policy says. What we are going to have to do is prioritise. So we have about 3,000 damp and mould cases at the moment, and we are categorising them into the severity. So the severity of the damp and mould and any other factors. For example, has the resident got asthma or things which would also prioritise the pace in which we respond. What again we can bring clarity to when we come back to the next meeting is show more clearly how we're going to respond to that, and it will mean the least severe damp and mould will take longer for us to respond to than the most severe. But what we want to be is really transparent about that. But I'll make clear that we are not disregarding any damp and mould and reports that come into the home. We will respond all to them, but we will have to prioritise.
Thank you, Chair. I think I'll just jump in there if I can. So in relation to your comment, Councillor Stone, around the budget, I need to take a look at that because you're absolutely right. Whilst there are some parcels of work we won't be doing, damp and mould remains a priority. I think the discussion then by the officer was around the prioritisation, and obviously we recognise that the way that we would prioritise is we deal with the greatest risk first. That doesn't mean to say that we don't deal with lower level damp and mould, because as you quite rightly point out, if it's not treated and not dealt with, then it becomes a bigger issue. So I'm trying to find where that is in the documents. I'll need to reference that.
Yeah, I flipped through the PowerPoints of the documents last night, and it clearly states in there that you're going to drop the budget for unurgent damp and mould. That's what it says as a savings budget proposal.
Could I come in? So obviously we've got the update on the Housing and Human Standards programme here, and what the council's raising is we've had some initial discussions, haven't we, about the budget for next year. And we're looking at some quite difficult proposals around that. So at this stage, they are just proposals, and you make a good point. We're continuing to look at them, aren't we? And there's a process that they will be coming into the public debate through the finance subcommittee, in that process to be looked at. But at the moment, these are just some things we're looking at for next year. So you make a good point. We'll have a look at it.
Sib, and then I'll move on.
Sorry, I think I just wanted to pick up on your question around the education of residents around damp and mould and how we respond to that. And I think it's important because we've all got a part to play around how we might mitigate that and in the way that we live. And what I would say is we produce quite a lot of documentation and information for residents that we're sending out regularly to educate our residents around how they can manage and the impacts of damp and mould based on the lifestyle choices.
Seb.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, Richard. I found the point that I was trying to have a discussion with you about. It's priority 3, neighbourhood and community standards. And one of the points here is that we plan to design, in collaboration with residents, local plans that meet their diverse needs. On page 302. However, when scrolling down towards the is it the consumer standard strategy or outcomes? Let me get to that next page. 2 secs. The antisocial behaviour and tackle domestic abuse. I think that could be quite a broader piece. Obviously, also linking very well with resident engagement. And also thinking about how we can better design, places within our estates. Back to the point above. So could we make the two kind of strategic outcomes and that actually link together?
Yes, absolutely. There's a lot of crossover between the neighbourhood standard and the tenancy standard, and developing our services to meet residents' needs, definitely. So that yes, we'll definitely strengthen that.
Brilliant. And my final question, Chair, is based on some of the stock conditions, would it be possible to actually provide maybe an area map that we can visually see where you're getting more kind of engagement and where you're getting less engagement, so we can be a bit more strategic, like what Lisa was suggesting? Maybe some residents are not making themselves available for the surveys, and therefore we can see that and we can act in accordance. At the moment, it's just the total number, as opposed to the total number plus different indicators of areas that are highly engaged and areas that are least engaged. Is that possible?
We can certainly provide that map. I think the stock conditions survey at the moment is driven by what we're posing the risk of the properties. So, for example, it's been focused on high-rise properties. It's also been focused on properties which are included in backlog programs. So where we know there's an issue, we've not got round to fixing it yet, we've prioritised the stock conditions survey. So we can certainly show where they are, but some of the grouping is probably how we are deliberately managing the programme, rather than resident engagement in the programme, but we can actually provide it.
Thank you, Richard. We must move on now. Time is pressing. Rose, can you read the recommendations, please?
So the Office of Recommendations are that the Committee for Homes and Housing Delivery note the Housing and Consumer Standards Programme Improvement Plan Summary. Note the Housing and Consumer Standards Landlord Compliance Programme Backlog Performance Report. Note the Business as Usual Landlord Compliance Performance Report. Note the Root Cause Reviews Update. Note the Draft Improvement Strategy. Note the feedback from the recent Housing Scrutiny Panel and Winter Housing Forums. And note the update from the latest regulatory review meeting with the Regulator for Social Housing.
Thank you. Can we formally note that, please? Cheers. Thank you, Richard. We'll move on now to Martin Johnson. Martin, you've got a new style presentation to enchant us with.
I do, thank you, Chair. Sorry, I should have sorted myself out before now. So we decided to present the finance update in a different format going forward, just to try and pull out some of the key points a bit more easily. Because it can be sometimes a little bit difficult when you're just looking at a page full of numbers. So, who's in charge of the presentation? Okay, can we go on to the next slide, please? No.
Do you think we seem to have been defeated technically at the first elite jump? Do you think you might? We've received the written report, and I think members will have the briefing. Do you mind? Can you speak to it?
I can. I mean, I've got the presentation up on my screen anyway, so I can just talk to it anyway. So the general fund revenue position has seen a slight improvement between periods. Sorry?
Yeah.
So it's seen a slight improvement between periods 5 and period 6. Housing options has seen a 0.2 million slight improvement for various items, and we've seen additional income within private housing of around 0.4 million. Housing delivery has also seen slight improvements of about 0.2 million for various minor issues. We do still have a couple of risks within the general fund housing area. We still have the risk around further subsidy loss, which is it's to sort of account for what we think may be the impact of new government policy coming into force.
Martin, sorry to interrupt. Bear in mind, I think the slides are working now. Do you want to say which actually slide, what number?
Okay, so that slide there.
Yeah, fine.
That slide there, yeah.
I think there's a long delay on it, is what it is. So.
Yeah.
I think when you clicked it earlier.
I don't know, no, it was doing that before. Oh, okay. Yeah, it was doing it already.
Okay, so on that slide there, just worth noting that the pressure we have for further subsidy loss, we have revised downwards in period 8. We don't think it's going to be anywhere near that scale from now on. If we move to general fund capital, next slide. Okay, general fund capital, we have seen slippage of 2.9 million against the schemes that are listed on the slide there, being the Philwood Cultural Hub, Bath Road site, South Mead Regeneration, and other various miscellaneous slippages totaling 0.2 million. Onto the HRA revenue account. We have seen an improvement in the position. We were previously forecasting an overspend of 14.8 million. That has come down in period 6 to 14.3 million. The main reasons for the main movements in the period are a £200,000, 0.2 million slippage of new build delivery is resulting in lower rental income. We have seen a big reduction against repairs and maintenance, where we have now undertaken an exercise to capitalise costs that should never have been revenue, but they go through revenue and then we have to capitalise them. We've now done that, so that's a 1.3 million reduction. There was an increase in the deficit of 0.7 million relating to a grant income classification. We had unfortunately incorrectly classified it as revenue income when it was capital. So that income assumption has come out of the revenue account and is now in the capital account. And there's 0.1 million of various other miscellaneous variances across the revenue account. Again, onto the risks and ops for the HRA. We do believe there is further capitalisation to take place. So we think we have another £500,000 that we can take out of revenue, but we are still working that through. It's come to light, unfortunately, that the legal recharges across the council have been done incorrectly for the year to date as a result of an issue with their case monitoring software. That has now been resolved, and in future periods we'll see that increase in legal charges coming into the HRA. We also think there may be an increase in our bad debt provision, but we are also expecting to see an increase in leasehold service charges. We've been working towards the final accounts for the year, and they are indicating that we may get an extra 400,000 or so, but we'll know more of that in the coming period. So the overall impact, can we have the next slide, please? Yeah. No, next one. That one, yeah. So what does this mean then? Clearly a significant overspend on the housing revenue account is not a sustainable position and not a position that we want to be in. But what it actually means in year is twofold. It means that we are going to use more of our reserves, but what it also means is that we are unable to borrow during the course of this year, because the large overspend has resulted in our interest cover ratio being below what it needs to be to allow us to borrow. This created a funding gap, if you will, of £53 million, where our capital plans the resources to fund our capital plans required £53 million worth of borrowings, which we were not able to undertake. So we have gone through a process and an exercise of mitigating that gap, and we have managed to eliminate the gap through a number of pieces of work, including very stringent revisions to our both our revenue and capital forecasts. There's been further slippage within both the HIP and the development programme. We are using more of our 141 receipts to fund our development programme because we can now use 100% instead of 50%. So we are allocating more this year. We have other capital receipts that we can use, which we are going to use to fund the capital programme. And we, as John alluded to earlier, have slowed down the acquisitions programme within the HRA. That in its own wasn't enough to cover absolutely everything, so we are having to use additional reserves of £16 million, which takes us down to our minimum reserve position, which clearly isn't a sustainable place. Can we go on to the capital? Yep. So just very quickly onto HRA capital. So we started the year with an approved budget of 358 million. This was revised down to 193 based on forecasts, and we are now forecasting spend a P6 of just under 180 million. That's a movement in the forecast of 15.5 from the previous period. The movements are an increase in spend on the home improvement programme for the installation of fire alarms, but also slippage in relation to night storage heaters, the contingency budget, some window replacements and easy forms and some stock surveys, and a couple of 100,000 which is various other miscellaneous amounts. In the new build programme, again, we have a big amount of slippage of 9.3 million. That is in relation to the Lawrence Weston, Brentry, Philwood Cinema, West Street, Marshall Walk, Hen Grove Apartments and Ederoth development sites. And we also have a small underspend on one of the sites which is completed, being Airport Road. So if that's the end of my update, if there are any questions, I'll happily take them.
Thank you, Martin. I'm sympathised because clearly you say you have the same problems with technology which I have. Can I first of all say, before taking questions, thank you to you and your team and the heads of service and Fiona, because I know the hard work you've done, not just over recent months but longer term. And certainly Councillor Parsons and myself are indebted to you for the excellent advice. I appreciate, as you've said, some of the room for manoeuvre we have this year now seems to have been brought to us by slippage rather than efficiency savings. But clearly there will be challenges, robust challenges next year and probably the next couple of years. But to my way of thinking, it makes absolutely clear the wisdom of the move we recently took to actually use general need housing, some of that full of temporary accommodation, and reduce our housing subsidy loss, of course. Clearly, we will need to do that elsewhere. You will be aware I have very supportful, but concerns that are sensible disposal plans of surplus property, non-residential, that has been mooted before. Paul will remember it 20 years ago, and wasn't necessarily followed through with the vigour it deserved. So I hope we'll have put grist to the mill and pursue that and forward that this time. Jerome.
Thank you, and thank you, Martin. I must say this has been impossible to understand, Martin. You know, the paper that we've got in our mod.gov is completely different from the presentation, and the order of things is different, which makes it really difficult to follow. So I'd request next time that what we're looking at is the same tables that are in mod.gov in the same order, so that we can, as you're talking, we can actually look through having pre-read it. the other kind of, and there's lots of very good, really helpful information that's there. The other general point that I'd make, and I don't necessarily expect immediate action on it, but is that given the profound challenge on finances, both organisationally and in housing, I think that finances should be the first item on every agenda, so that we're getting that better balance between delivery and policy setting.
Could I just intervene before Martin responds? We did have that debate during the agenda conference, and you're right in a way. The risk report, which comes next, and the finance report should actually shape everything else. But the homelessness reports Paul brought were involved key decisions rather than to note reports. So that's why we brought that then. But you're right in my view. Martin?
I mean, that the feedback on the presentation, I can take that away and look at that. If anybody has any other feedback of anything they would like to see in there, then I'm very happy to take that. This is the first time that we've done it in this format, so I wasn't expecting it to be absolutely perfect. And the other point about finance being the first item on the agenda, I think the chair's answered that.
Could I suggest, if we members have points about the format in future, let's do that online. Perhaps you can email Rose. That's fine. I don't see any other hands. No. Sib?
Well, in one way it links to the risk register, but it links more to finance, I guess. And as Jerome just mentioned about that strong focus on finance, I would like to just check with yourself here, mate, that, let me get my bearings. 2 seconds, sorry, Chair. Yes, that's the one. In terms of spillage and looking at it from both risk and overspend, are we able to do an analysis of our last spillage over a period of, 3-4 years, and look at the providers that have been delivering particular services, so we can better see where the spillage mainly occur? And if it occurs consistently through some providers, then maybe there's an option there of really being more risk tight with those providers if the market is tight on those delivery partners being available.
I think Fiona's going to take that question.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So, Sib, the slippage relates to often the new build slippage, okay. And what I will say is that is quite common for new build programs throughout the city for all, all providers of new builds, because there are a number of factors that create slippage within the profile of a new build that can go over sometimes 6 to 8 years of delivery, and that will be things like, obviously supply, but often it's weather related. It will be finding something in the land when they start to do their initial work that means that it causes delays. And so what we do is we do monitor slippage really carefully. So the development team will provide monthly updates, very detailed reports on slippage and what they anticipate, so that we can look forward to see what's happening. But it is quite common, and really what I would say is we're far more robust now in our understanding of slippage, our monitoring of that within in-year budget, and how we therefore demonstrate that and evidence that. So previously we weren't doing that quite as well as we are now.
Yeah, yes, that's really reassuring to know. And I guess we could go a step further there, just to better understand from those providers how consistent is slippage, just so we can just say there's more consistent slippage here consistently, maybe even across the different partners that may work with that same provider, we need to be a bit tighter here, you know, X, Y, and Z, just in terms of managing our supply chain.
Thank you, Martin. I appreciate the presentation. Rose, could you read the recommendation, please?
The Officer recommendations are that the Committee for Homes and Housing Delivery notes the report on the P6 forecast for housing and landlord services.
Can I formally propose we note that? The final item is item 14, the corporate risk, risk report. No?
Yeah, Gary. Yeah.
I believe Richard will actually present this.
Thank you. Sorry. Look at me, a bit clumsy. Sorry. Yeah, I'm just going to give a really, really brief update on the risk report. So the corporate risk report is from end of quarter 2, 2024-25. It picks out 4 corporate risks. So within that, there is one critical level risk, which is CRR 60, and that relates to compliance with the consumer standards and landlord compliance. We've spoken around that a lot already, and that was escalated to the highest level, to the critical level, in response to the external reviews that were carried out by Saville, the self-referral, and then the regulatory judgment. There are 3 static high risks. One is CRR 48, which is to do with new affordable housing provision. Another is CRR 52, which is to do with building safety. So that's more to do with response to the Building Safety Act and how we manage high-rise buildings rather than general landlord compliance. And the last one is CRR 37, which is to do with our response to homelessness.
Thank you, Richard. Any questions, Jerome?
I think it would be, I mean, I agree with all those risks and all that risk analysis. I think it would be useful just to have a kind of like a one-page summary, because even though this is supposed to be a summary, it's still really difficult to look at. I don't understand why the state of the housing finances and repeatedly missing budget. I mean, that's not, you know, we know there's lots of good reasons why that isn't designated as a key risk. So I'm just kind of curious on that.
Yeah, I think some of this is because of the looking back. It takes quite a while for the strategic risks to come through. So this is from quarter 2 position, but there is a strategic risk which is related to HRA finances, and that will be reviewed for this quarter, and it could well be escalated. I can't preempt that. It's not in my gift, but there absolutely is a strategic risk which will be reviewed, and if it's deemed to reach that sufficient level, it will definitely come in more detail.
Joss.
One observation, looking at this report, I feel quite reassured because the things that we've been worrying about and the things that we bring to committee are the same things that are in the risk register report. So actually, in a way, it shows that we are identifying the highest risks and the things that we need to concentrate our energy on and that's in a way that's a positive, so that there aren't any shocks in here, and that's absolutely right and correct. So in a way we are looking at the right things as a committee. So I'm just trying to take the positives out of some of the negatives, really. Thank you.
Richard, can I thank you for presenting that, particularly for so nobly picking up at the 11th hour. I'm sure Fiona owes you that Sea Harrier I suggested last time. Rose, could you read the recommendation? Oh, sorry. Sib. Yeah.
Yeah, just a quick one, mate. In terms of the improving our grading, yeah, is it reviewed? Like, how often is it reviewed? When would we, can we get an upgrade in 6 months. You know, what's the process with kind of showing that improvement? Is it like after 5 years or?
There's not a static time. The regulator won't do a proactive inspection until we've responded to the regulatory judgment. And what we'd like to do is make the strategy document be really clear about our journey. My gut feeling, but this is only my gut feeling, is we are probably looking at 12 to 18 months, and then the regulator would probably be looking at doing a proactive inspection at that point. But what we'd like to do is make sure that journey is better articulated in the strategy.
Yeah.
So just in relation to the risk register and how that's monitored.
Yeah.
So it's regularly updated, and we get reminders corporately of the dates and the deadlines to make sure that is done. So behind the risk will sit lots and lots of updates that come from officers, but only once we recognise that we can really demonstrate and evidence that risk can be reduced, will it be reduced?
Yeah.
You know, in terms of likelihood and risk weighting.
And how does that kind of progress then link with the budget? So if you're able to show improvement, then you've got less risk, and if you're able to show less risks, does that mean you have better? You can prioritize finances in other spaces.
I would say that if looking forward, because as we explained, the risk register looks back. So looking forward, if there was a risk that was highlighted around HRA finances, the way that we'd be able to demonstrate a mitigation against that risk would be if we were able to evidence that we've put in suitable controls to reduce our concerns around producing a balanced budget.
Yeah.
But would be, you know, as we just said, we'd have to be able to clearly articulate that, which is what we will do.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you.
Fine. Rose?
Thank you. The officer recommendations are that the Homes and Housing Delivery this report.
Thank you very much. So I formally move we note it. That brings us to the end of the marathon session, of course. Just a quick, sorry, Zoe.
I just want to officially noted that I have not gone from living in a women's refuge to social housing to private renting for you to act like I have no lived experience or refer to my point of view as insanity. I just want that on the record.
Fine. Well, thank you for allowing us to bring the meeting to a consensual conclusion. I appreciate that in the spirit of the season. It's been an interesting 7.5 months. We've had a new governance model, we've had a new committee system, and as I've said to Ed, among others, I personally think we're very lucky with this committee and being served by such excellent, hard-working officers. Can I thank the members for your contribution, and also particularly the officers who will work very hard. I've said it in a different place. For my sins or my constituents' sins, I've been elected for 33 years in May. I have to say, and I'm not seeking to curry favour, I don't believe fewer officers have worked so hard under such pressure during that period. So well done, and thank you. We couldn't do it without you. And with that, can I be a bit more consensual than Zoe and wish you a happy Christmas and a prosperous New Year? With that, I formally close the meeting.